Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I've listened very attentively over the last day and a half. And I listened also to the previous speaker speak about how important culture, youth, and sport, the Ministry of Culture, Youth, and Sport was until the APNU AFC disbanded the ministry under their tenure. And Mr. Speaker, I want to start off by saying that when you come to this house, you have to come to this house with credibility. And I'm glad that the previous speaker and the Honorable Member Christopher Jones has personalized this debate. And I've said to them many times, I've said to the honorable members of this house many times before, don't get personal with me. Don't get personal with me. There is an old legal maxim. There is an old legal maxim that he who comes to equity must come with clean hands. Clean hands. People who steal barber chairs can't criticize us. People who steal pigs can't criticize us. People who steal bangles, bed sheets, and bracelets can't criticize us. People who give their companies, their video production companies, contracts cannot criticize us. People who transfer $90 million into their bank accounts within 3 months cannot criticize us. People who build the Durban Park project for $1.4 billion and $600 million can't be found, can't criticize us. People who sole source the drug bond, a bottom house for a drug bond for $12.5 million a month, costing taxpayers $340 million, can't criticize us. People who spent $1 billion on Sarah and can produce nothing cannot criticize us. People who say that they won an election but cannot show their statements of polls cannot criticize us. People who have never run a cake shop, much less a foul pen, cannot criticize us. You're hollering, I ain't done yet. Just like the Honorable Ralph Gonsalves, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, said, take your licks like a man. Take your licks like a man. And in the famous words of the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Mottley, what did she say when she defended our democracy on the APNU AFC's attempt to rig the election? The truth hurts. The truth hurts. That is why no protest you will ever call will ever get any people out there to come and support you. No protest. The scores of protests that you called in the last year and a half, nobody came to support you. Why? Why? The people of the country know who you are. Know who they are, Mr. Speaker. You have no credibility. So I'm pleased, Mr. Speaker, to come to this House to support the country's largest budget in this country's history. And this budget is not just the largest budget in the country's history. It is a 44% increase from the previous year. There are no taxes added. In fact, the taxes have been reduced. We are about to spend $1.5 billion in this economy every single year for the year 2022. Increasing money in circulation, creating thousands of jobs, creating invaluable lasting benefits for the people of the country, creating a new and transformed Guyana. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the budget deficit as a percentage of GDP is lower. Our net domestic borrowing is low. It has fallen in half by half from 100 billion to now 50 plus billion in 2022. So the government is not competing with the private sector on loans. Our money supply is higher. That means more money in circulation. Our foreign reserves have now doubled. It moved from 400 million US dollars under the APNUAFC to now $800 million US under us. Our balance of trade is moved from a deficit of 1.5 billion US dollars to now, that was under the APNUAFC, to now of a surplus of 375 million US dollars. So our macroeconomic position is healthier, Mr. Speaker. And on the very day that this historic budget was presented to this country, it was the very day that the leader of the opposition resigned. And for the first time in our democracy since the democracy was restored in 1992, Guyana does not have a leader of the opposition. So for all the folks who voted APNUAFC, this is what you are continuing to get from the APNUAFC. Betrayal. You betrayed the people of the country while you were in government, and you are continuing to betray the people of the country today. And all that confusion, Mr. Speaker, that is happening in the opposition, it is their deeds that are catching up with them. The closing down of the sugar estates and the firing of 7,000 sugar workers, making them beg for their severance. The firing of the 2,000 CSO Amerindian officers, the breaching of the Constitution multiple times, the betraying of young people, the refusal to call an election within 3 months after you lost a no-confidence motion, the insulting of the Guyanese intelligence by telling them that 33 is not a majority of 65, attempting to rig the election in front of the entire world, refusing to exit the office of the government for 5 months and causing this country trauma. And just when we thought, Mr. Chairman, just when we thought that the international embarrassment was over, they go and attempt to steal the mace on Facebook Live. They go and attempt to steal the mace on Facebook Live. And some of you should be careful how you're heckling me, Mr. Speaker. Some of them should be careful of how they're heckling me, because they're not sure they will keep their seats at the end of this parliament. Meanwhile, Mr. Speaker, with this budget, the President Ali-led PPPC government is about to commence the transformation of Guyana into a modern and prosperous country before our very eyes. All of our promises we presented in our manifesto, we will keep and we will honor every single one. We promise to reverse every single one of the taxes, the 200 plus taxes the APNUAFC heartlessly put on the people of the country. We remove them. The VAT on electricity, gone. The VAT on water, gone. The VAT on data, gone. The VAT on cell phones, gone. The VAT on agri-machinery, gone. The VAT on mining equipment, gone. The VAT on construction material, gone. The VAT on exports, gone. We promised that we would distribute 50,000 house lots, and we are on track, Mr. Speaker. We've already done over 10,000 house lots in our first year. In our first year, Mr. Speaker, we have distributed more house lots than the APNU AFC did in their entire 5 years in government. It will be the greatest transfer of wealth to the ordinary people of the country within any 5-year period to date. We promised 20,000 scholarships, and we've already done 6,000. We promised that we would return the discipline services bonus, and we have returned so. We promised that we would return the children's cash grant, the school cash grant that the APNU AFC took away from the ordinary people you're claiming to love so much now. And we returned it, and we increased it already to $25,000 per child. We extended it to the private schools as well. And with the uniform cash grant, it's now up to $30,000 per child. And we will deliver the $50,000 cash grant per child. Meanwhile, the APNU AFC, even in opposition, they cannot keep their promises. They promised that they would hold a protest every Wednesday at lunchtime at coffee, and they cannot even honor their promise. And they cannot even honor their promise in opposition. They promised that they would take the People's Parliament that they had by the Market Square, by the Stabroek Market. The honorable members on the other side started to pomposette themselves outside by the Market Square. And they have not done that. They could not even honor their word. And the method, Mr. Speaker, of government is different too. The President Ali-led People's Progressive Party government is always on the ground building with people, forming a partnership with people, consulting every single day. One member of our cabinet, and sometimes many members of our cabinet, are in the fields and on the ground every single day, consulting with people, building with people. So when you want to ask about how the consultation took place in building this budget, it is building every single day with people. I have done more consultations with communities and stakeholders than the APNU did, entire APNU did while they were in government for their entire 5 years. That the Honorable Ashley Singh, the Minister of Finance, actually said that I do more interviews in a day explaining everything going on with our sector than former President David Granger did for his entire 5 years. And I want to say this about the oil money, Mr. Speaker. Many people are asking, how are they going to benefit from oil money? They hear a lot about oil money. And it's a fair question because given the APNU AFC's history with oil money, where they hid the $18 million and then it disappeared. And then also when the government of Guyana's petroleum advisor was Carol Smith Joseph. Mr. Speaker, the most exciting oil economy in the world, the petroleum advisor to the government of Guyana was Carol Smith Joseph. It is natural that the people of the country would be jaded as a result of their history with the APNU AFC and oil. But I would like to advise the people of the country that this is the first year that we will be spending our oil money in the economy. So this is the first time that you will be seeing real benefits. What are we spending on? Guyana has to leapfrog the developmental curve, Mr. Speaker. We have to convert our oil resources from under the ground into assets and infrastructure capital above the ground. All the developmental economists will tell you, spend the money first on infrastructure. And I saw the honorable member, Mr. Ramjatan, who likes to quote this book called The Bottom Billion. He's been quoting this book, The Bottom Billion, since 2008. 15 plus years ago, he's quoting this book from Paul Collier. But Mr. Ramjatan, you have to update your book collection. You have to update your book collection. Guyana has changed. This same book, the same author who actually presented this book to me, he gave me a signed copy. A signed copy. In this book, Paul Collier would tell you, spend your money on infrastructure. That is the first thing that you should be doing when you're spending your oil money. Not have a big party, not raise salaries. Spend your money first on infrastructure. And what are some of these transformational infrastructure? The gas to power project, which will lower our electricity costs by 50%. Creating more monies in people's pocket, which the preliminary work is already on the way. The new bridge over the Demerara River. And this will give us back time, Mr. Speaker. A 4-lane high-span bridge, not the 3-lane bridge that the APNU AFC wanted to build. The Amaila Hydro Falls project. And I also want to mention something else. The Honorable Ashni Singh mentioned as well something in his budget speech which brought me back to around 2010 when we were trying to build the Hope Canal. You remember, Honorable Minister Robson Ben, when you were the Minister of Public Works, when we were trying to build the Hope Canal. I want to share with you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to leave this so that you can have the benefit and the House can have the benefit of this. The opposition, first of all, naturally oppose it. That is expected. Just anything that is beneficial to the people of the country, once the People's Progressive Party is doing it, they will oppose it. But there is something that I wanted to leave here just for the sake of reference, because there are a lot of young people who are going to be...
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of order.
Go ahead.
41-6. The honourable member is trying to impugn improper motive on my character, contrary to my colleagues.
Honourable member, honourable minister, you may want to expunge the honourable deputy speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I will judge all of the support for the budget when it comes time to the voting for the budget. So I want to leave with this House 2 articles, one from the Stabrook News and one from the Kaichor News, which says the GRA urges the suspension of the Hope Canal project, and the Hope Canal project expenditure is reckless. This project, when it was being opposed by this body, the Guyana Human Rights Association, even though it had nothing to do with human rights, nothing to do with human rights, they opposed this project, and since its construction has saved Guyana billions and billions of dollars of economic value and welfare to people. So I'm leaving these here, Mr. Speaker. We are going to be building 2 more canals to save all of the regions where those economic values and agriculture is being done. Mr. Speaker, I also want to say one other thing on oil, because The Sovereign Wealth Fund, many times the debate is confused by making reference to Norway. And why I want to clarify this position, Mr. Speaker, is that Norway found oil in 1969. It started producing first in 1971 from Ecofist. And it did not set up its sovereign wealth fund until 1990. It did not transfer its first capital into the fund until 1996. Norway had 25 years of spending their oil money on infrastructure for schools, hospitals, buildings, roads, bridges. All of those things were built during those 25 years. So why should it be any different for us here in Guyana, where we have a weakness in our infrastructure, or public infrastructure, public infrastructure stock in the country? And I would like to touch on the criticism that we're hearing from the opposition, who have now gone silent. They've now gone silent. The criticism that we hear from the APNU AFC is that it's inconsistent, first of all. The first is they're saying that the budget is too big. At one point they're saying the budget is too big, and then the other time they're saying that we should be giving more. Well, you can't do both. You can't do both. And then I hear from one of the honorable members mention the term trickle-down economics. We heard them saying that what the PPP is doing is trickle-down economics. And then she turned to another young member on the other side and saying, yes, they're practicing trickle-down economics. We are not practicing trickle-down economics. And just like I have to teach the honorable member, Mr. Figueroa, and then I also have to teach now Mr. Jones, I now have to teach the other young members on the other side. When you are doing trickle-down economics, you reduce taxes on things like capital gains. You reduce taxes on high-income earners. You reduce taxes on things like savings and dividends. We are not doing any of that. We are reducing the taxes on consumption. We are reducing the tax on productivity, capital stock, reducing those taxes. And on the young members of the other side, I see them disappear. I want them to hear what I'm about to say, so they may be listening to me wherever they are. For the young members on the other side, you have to earn the stripes, not the right, not the right. You already have the right by being a member of parliament. But you have to earn the stripes to diss certain members in this house. Certain people, especially in this front row, don't go down in the road of being personal with them. You haven't earned the stripes. Many of you have not even run a pig pen properly. You have not even run a fowl pen properly. Mr. Speaker, when I came to the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport, it was not even a ministry. When I came here and we added up all of the allocations for the year of 2020, we had an allocation of 2.89 billion. For 2022, Mr. Speaker, we now have an allocation of $5.6 billion, just under 100% increase. And when an honorable member came to this house and said that the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport is so important, it's so important, it was the APNU AFC who disbanded the ministry and relegated it to departments within ministry, betraying young people. Not a single young person was appointed to a member of the cabinet. Not a single young person was appointed a minister in the previous government. And I hear the honorable members is saying, Tabitha, you're old. The honorable members don't even know, including the honorable member, Mr. Tabitha. The honorable members don't even know that Mr. Tabitha was a Charandas baby. Mr. Bito was a Charandas baby. She was appointed in April of 2019 after the no confidence motion. And what does the Constitution say when you lose a no confidence motion? Let me remind them. The famous 106 sub 6 says, the cabinet, including the president, shall resign if the government is defeated by the majority, by the vote of a majority of all elected members of the National Assembly on a vote of confidence. So if there was a single appointment, then that again was the breach of the Constitution. That was another breach of the Constitution. The People's Progressive Party has restored the ministry to its rightful place with a seat at the cabinet, and the result is our budget, culture, youth and sport, has doubled. The youth budget just for training now stretches across all ministries, many of the ministries with large allocations. The Ministry of Education for technical vocational education will receive $2.5 billion. For young people, training of young people, University of Guyana will get $3.5 billion. The Ministry of Public Service Gold Program for scholarships for young people will get $1.3 billion, plus an additional $1 billion for training in the public service, many of whom are young people. The Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport for training and youth programs will get $841 million. The Ministry of Labor, the Board of Industrial Training will get $450 million. The new Port Morant Training School focusing on oil and gas will get $260 million. And that's training alone. The tens of thousands of young people who will benefit from house lots and young professional homes. That is happening because you have the care and concern for young people in the country. Youth entrepreneurship will also see major benefits. Mr. Speaker, for sport, the budget is now $3.15 billion with a capital of $2.4 billion. And every single sport association and federation has issued statements for the first time in the history of this country, has issued statements in support of the government, in support of the ministry, in support of the program and the relationship that they have with the minister and the National Sports Commission. I will leave all of their statements here, Mr. Speaker. And after the appointment of our National Sports Commission and the Director of Sports, our board has been working. Meanwhile, under the APNU AFC, their board met 3 times in 3 years. 3 times in 3 years. The Director of Sport came here and pomposetted himself once again. He said that he cared so much about sport and young people. Not a single financial statement, audited financial statement as required by the Act, was ever produced and laid in this Parliament. Not a single one for the entire APNU AFC as required by the law. That is being done now and will be laid before this Honorable House. Mr. Speaker, we also completed the Guyana Cricket Board election, something that didn't happen for over 10 years, that was fraught with all kinds of problems. And I don't need his criticism or his approbation. What I have here is a public statement from none other than Sir Clive Lloyd. Sir Clive Lloyd. He issued a public statement after we saw the completion of the election. And let me just read the last paragraph, and I will leave this with you too, Mr. Speaker. He said, finally, and I quote, he said, finally, it would be remiss of me not to refer to the efficiency with which the young Minister of Sports, Honorable Charles, ensured the return of due regularity in the administration of cricket by insisting and ensuring that elections were held at every level, including that of the GCB. End of quote. Sir, and I had the privilege.
Honorable Minister, end of time. You need an extension.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to ask for the honourable member be given 5 minutes to conclude his presentation. Thank you.
Honorable Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport, you may continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I had the privilege of having a conversation, a phone call with him after he was knighted by the Queen. So I hold this statement, this public statement issued to me, not the words said by the Honourable Member Jermaine Piguero and the Honourable Member Barber Cheers. No, their words for me mean nothing. The words of Sir Clive Lloyd mean something to me. The words of the sports associations mean something to me. The words of the people of the country mean something to me. Mr. Speaker, we returned the Kashif and Shanghai GFF tournament. We returned the three-stage cycle race after 5 years, after the AP and UAFC cut funding, cut the race. We had the inaugural sports conference where we had the consultation for our first ever sports academy. And then we launched our sports academy in December. We also, on the international scene, Mr. Speaker, we had the West Indies versus Pakistan tournament right here in Guyana. We also bid for and succeeded in hosting the Under-19 World Cup tournament right here in Guyana. Mr. Speaker, our capital money is going to be spent on the transformation of all of our sports facilities and the building of our stadiums that the President announced in one of his speeches that he made to the public. Mr. Speaker, for culture, the AP and UAFC like to pretend that they are the cultured, sophisticated group until the cloak of sophistication was removed with the unsophisticated and rank attempt to rig the 2020 election. And that's when you saw the true nature of the beast. True nature of the beast. While in government, the AP and UAFC loved culture so much that they removed the Guyana Prize for Literature. They removed the Cultural Endowment Fund. They disbanded the Caribbean Press and replaced it with nothing, no explanation, nothing. Meanwhile, in their 2020 election year, they want to spend and did spend $290 million on Mashramani and $50 million on Bujubantan tickets. In 2021, we did the Cultural and Creative Industry Grant for 30 young people who received $1 million for their cultural projects, cultural and creative projects. And I'm pleased to announce the return of the Cultural Endowment Fund, which will be in the sum of $100 million. I'm also pleased to announce the return of the Guyana Prize for Literature. Mr. Speaker, those 18 events that we were talking about and that the honorable member wanted to speak disparagingly about, the country needed it in a time of COVID. Mental health was the most important thing of keeping people sane, keeping people in their relationships sane. And those virtual concerts helped in promoting mental health as a form of entertainment, safe entertainment in the country. And those events were of a very high standard. And the high point of those events, Mr. Speaker, was our cultural performance at the Dubai World Expo, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and I want to just talk to on our ground enhancement because this is something that is very popular in the country. Mr. Speaker, out of our allocation, I have never, after going around the country, I have never seen all of our community grounds and community centers so neglected. They were in such a poor state despite claiming that they've spent all that money. And that is why the Community Ground Center Ground Enhancement Program is so popular, because it is making such a big difference to the people of the country. We, out of our last budget, Mr. Speaker, we have already lighted 9 community grounds across this country with solid concrete poles and LED lights and running underground wiring. And I'm pleased as well to announce that in this year's allocation, there will be $250 million in our budget for ground enhancement. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by saying this. I and we are not laboring under any misapprehension that the APNU AFC will support this budget. I and the People's Progressive Party, we are not laboring under the misapprehension that the APNU AFC will support anything that is beneficial to the people of this country, because it is the People's Progressive Party that is in power. So when, and I know this for a fact, Mr. Speaker, because when they can want and call for a boycott of a cleanup event in this country, we know where their heart is. And it's not for the benefit of this country. It is for the benefit of themselves. And that is why they're fighting so hard to get back into power. But the people of the country knows who they are. So, Mr. Speaker, either way, the country is moving on regardless, and the country will prosper without them. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.